Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 26 series with the Los Angeles Angels. And we are heading towards the midway point of this 2025 season. Has not been particularly successful on the field for our Angels. A 30-37 record has us last place in the American League West, 9 games behind the Seattle Mariners. I will say that we took over this team in mid-March, so its roster was kind of set by the time we got involved. Made a few trades along the way. One bright spot this season has been the young starter, Reed Detmers, the 25-year-old, ranks third in the American League with a 2.41 earned run average. Kenley Jansen tied for second in the league in saves, although as a team with a 448 winning percentage, we're going to have fewer save opportunities than most of the teams in baseball. We did just make one trade, and I won't call this a minor one. I don't want to minimize it. It was a pretty important deal for us. We've been talking about Jorge Soler, number 5 hitter in our lineup, making $13 million this year, and even more importantly, $13 million next year. Be 34 years old next season. He's not that great defensively, and he struggled this year as well, hitting just a .196. Does have 13 homers and 30 ribbies, but the whole package is still a 90 WRC plus, and he's been below replacement level. So we just shopped him around, and we were able to get a pretty interesting player in return. We did also have to include a 19-year-old minor league starter, Trey Gregory Alford, who was picked in the 11th round a year ago. With the lack of control that he has and the lack of a third pitch, don't really view him as a big-time prospect. And in return, we got the infielder Brooks Lee, 24 years old, very competent defensively, and we think he could be a decent contact hitter who will draw a few walks down the line. Has spent parts of the last 2 seasons in the major leagues with the Twins organization and has not been particularly effective. We've got him down in Salt Lake, where he'll probably stay until September. Have him starting to learn how to play third base there, so he can be a versatile infielder for us. And he also has ratings that indicate he could play an outfield spot for us. So once he's trained up on third base, likely to give him a little bit of action in center field and maybe even right field. Think that Lee could be a versatile, cheap, good defensive player for us for the next several seasons. He's also a switch hitter. Certainly looks like he's a little more competent against left-handed pitching than right-handed pitching. 24 years old, so certainly not a young prospect at this point, but he was about the most we could get in return for Mr. Soler, and we also cleared some more salary off of our books for next year. We're hoping to, in our first off season with this team starting in several months, really be able to jumpstart this rebuild, and hopefully, even if we do end up with a losing record this year, put these Los Angeles Angels in a position where in 2026 we will be a competitor after a decade of not really being a competitor. And if you watched our previous episode, you know that we just completed the draft combine. Leaves us about a month away from the first-year player draft. Our impressions right now is that we've got the second pick in the draft, and there is one player in the draft pool that stands above all the others. That's the young third baseman, Ethan Holliday. He is projected to go number 1 overall to the Nationals, but we're still holding out some hope that for some reason he will drop to us with the number 2 pick in the draft. If not, there's still some interesting options out there, but I definitely view Holliday as easily the best player in this draft right now, but we've got another month of scouting and getting to know these players and their potential better before we will have to actually make that decision. And our Angels have been having a really horrible month here in the month of June, really falling out of it. We've been in last place most of this season, but only 4 wins so far this month, and it's June 20th has really led to us falling further and further behind. Some bad news for Mickey Moniak also. He was finally getting a chance to be an everyday player once again with the fact that we had traded away Soler. Just suffered a torn calf muscle, and he's gone for 4 or 5 months. So his season's going to end with a 237 average, 5 homers and 16 ribbies in just 114 at-bats. And the injuries are starting to build for our team. In addition to losing Mr. Moniak for the year, Nolan Shawnell, Luis Rengifo, and Mike Trout banged up. Trout, a bicep strain, but it only is going to impact his throwing. So we're actually just going to DH Trout for the next 3 weeks and hope that we can still have his bat in the lineup. Certainly will miss not having his defense in center field. Trout on the year hitting 247, 9 homers, 35 ribbies, is 10 for 10 stealing bases. Ultimately has been a slightly above average offensive player with a 105 WRC plus. So definitely would be hoping for more from the kid, given that he's making $35 million a year. But if we can keep him healthy and get over 120 games, which we're already halfway to at this point, have to view that as a victory at this stage of his career. And things still not going particularly well for our Los Angeles Angels, 32-45, 13.5 games out in the AL West. Just got our midseason review from Artie Moreno. Not shockingly disappointed in our team's performance. Wants us to build a better farm system and also wants us to improve our fan interest. He's ecstatic with our progress towards goals so far, but not quite as happy when he looks at our on and off the field history. Final evaluation coming at the end of this season, of course. Hasn't been great so far, but as we've talked about, we're trying to position this team as well as possible for the future. And we've definitely cut our salary obligations both this year and, more importantly, next year. Hopefully we will be able to spend some money this upcoming off season and really get this team heading in a better direction. And every time we check in on our Angels, it seems like we're 2-8 in our last 10, 14.5 behind in the division, and our .386 winning percentage is ahead of only the Detroit Tigers in all of the American League, and better than only the Marlins, the Rockies, and the Tigers in all of baseball. So things have unraveled very quickly here. No one on the leaderboard for us anymore as far as any of the primary pitching or offensive categories. Just a little over a week away, or a little less than a week away from the draft at this point, so we can continue hoping that we're going to have something in front of us to help with our future, because right now the present isn't very good. Even our backup catcher says the team is going nowhere and he wants out. Unfortunately, Travis d'Arnaud doesn't really have a ton of value right now. We've got a team option for $6 million for him next year if we're unable to move on from him in the coming weeks. Very unlikely that we're going to exercise a $6 million team option on a soon-to-be 37-year-old backup catcher who's hitting a .186 for us this year and complaining about his role and how the team's doing. And we've made it to draft day. Looks like Ethan Holiday has dropped to be the second-ranked prospect in the draft at this point. Still would love an opportunity to get him with the number 2 pick. Jamie Arnold, 21-year-old college lefty. I think his stuff and his control could all be well above average, and he's got a nice 4-pitch arsenal. Spending this final season of his at Florida State as a junior, where he's gone 8-2 with a 2.69 ERA. He is now viewed as the number 1 prospect. Still think it's going to be very surprising if the Nationals don't pick with the first overall pick Mr. Holiday. Obviously, we'll hope that it happens. Don't know what happened. There was a mock draft here that we looked at last episode when we were checking in on the draft combine, but it seems to have disappeared at this point, which is a little weird. The other thing that I have noticed is that maybe if we go to the first-year player draft, we'll see it. No, that's where we are. Very interesting. Another thing that I have noticed, in addition to the mock draft apparently disappearing, is that when we look at the draft pool, we have been scouting these players very aggressively. I always scout the draft very aggressively every year, and you can see catcher Caden Bodine, Ethan Holiday, and Sean Gamble, the three guys that we did meet with at the draft combine. Well, I've got very high scouting accuracy on them, but we are average to high scouting accuracy on most of the other top prospects, and we're average and low scouting accuracy on a lot of the second-tier prospects. So don't know if it's just because at the start of a new game that our scout doesn't come in with knowledge of the younger players, and it's just something that will build up over time by having a really good scout who kind of knows these guys pretty well by the time the draft class are announced. But it's definitely been a struggle. You can see here with the pitchers, again, the four that we met with at the combine: Seth Hernandez, Liam Doyle, Jamie Arnold, and Aaron Watson. We've all got very high scouting accuracy on them, but unfortunately average to high scouting accuracy on most of the other players. And even one pretty solid prospect, Nelson Cahoe, we've got low scouting accuracy on him. So might be a little more challenging to get scouting results here in OOTP 26. I don't want to make any blanket statements or rash judgments based on one draft, but definitely noticeable to me, given the effort that I put in trying to scout these classes, that we've got a lot to learn about some of these players. And we will go ahead and get this draft started. And the draft is a different type of situation now. A little bit of a different screen here. You can see all of your scouting recommendations right up on top. You can see your draft picks and the slots that come do kind of like this enhancement. Draft pipeline. Oh, you can see the mock draft here, so that's good. And they now have Washington going with Jamie Arnold. So it looks like it is an updated mock draft from the one that we had looked at before. That's good to see, because the mock draft, I believe, used to be something that was usually a couple months old by the time you got to the draft. So it's interesting that it's a little more dynamic. I am still going to be shocked if Jamie Arnold goes ahead of Ethan Holiday, but let's see what happens. Oh, and maybe I did notice that I was in the previous episode, I think that I had commissioner mode on, just because if anything went weird with this new version of the game, I wanted to be able to address it. But I'm going to turn it off right now and just see if anything looks different in the draft. Seems like the sheet is what the sheet is, so we are going to let Washington pick, and then we will find out whether Ethan Holiday will really be an option for us. And unfortunately, as expected, despite what they said in the latest mock draft, Washington made the fairly obvious choice and went with Ethan Holiday with the first overall selection. So with the second overall pick, it does mean we've got our choice of well over 1,100 other players, but the one that we had been dreaming about as somebody that we could potentially build this turnaround around is off the market, unfortunately. We'll take a look at the three top position players here. Left fielder Jace Laviolette. Don't love the lack of contact and the fact that he's likely to strike out a lot. Does have incredible power, pretty mediocre speed, pretty mediocre defensively. Looking for $8.5 million. I don't think the left-hander out of Texas A&M is a direction we will go. Third baseman Lucas Franco, highly regarded by our scout. The left-handed hitting infielder, certainly looks like a very solid defensive player, pretty average in terms of his speed, and we think his bat could be slightly above average. As I mentioned, a guy that we did invest some effort in back at the Combine last month was the shortstop Sean Gamble. Like a lot of the aspects of his personality, the low adaptability, not perfect, but still his high leadership, loyalty, work ethic, and baseball IQ. A guy who could play a lot of different positions in the infield or the outfield, slightly above average in his speed, and we think he can be a good contact hitter with slightly above average gap power. He's committed to Vanderbilt, going to cost $7 million to bring on board, but certainly think that Gamble could be an interesting player as well. Among the position players, definitely least interested in Laviolette. Gamble, I like a lot, but honestly, I don't hate Lucas Franco. Got a little more home run pop in his bat, a little better defensively. I think if it came down to one or the other, even though Franco's cheaper, I would go with Gamble. But there's also a very legitimate chance that we end up going with a pitcher here with our first selection. And we know three of the top five pitchers very well, having met with Hernandez, Doyle, and Arnold extensively during the Combine. Starting pitcher Seth Hernandez, 19-year-old out of Chino, California, already throws in the mid to high 90s. We think his stuff and his control could be well above average. Only a three-pitch arsenal, but with the development lab in the last two versions of OOTP, that's less of an issue than it was in the day. Solid stamina, decent at holding on runners. Charismatic clubhouse personality, but his poor work habits not optimal. High leadership and adaptability, low loyalty and work ethic. He's committed to Vanderbilt, looking for $11.5 million, which even for the second overall pick is above slot. He's had an outstanding season, as you'd expect for a dominant high school pitcher. Almost 15 strikeouts per 9 innings and a 9-0 record with a sub-1 ERA. Evan Crest, out of Jacksonville University. A lot of negative personality traits there. Guy with a three-pitch arsenal, good stamina, but I think the negative personality traits, even though he's not looking for a lot of money, are going to rule him out for me. Another college pitcher, Liam Doyle, out of Coastal Carolina. I think his stuff and his movement could both be above average. Potential 3 to 4 pitch arsenal, throws in the mid to high 90s, good stamina. Looking for a lot of money, too, for the 21-year-old lefty. Definitely prefer him to Crest, however. Miguel Cime Jr., 18-year-old out of New York, New York. I think his stuff and his movement could both be above average. Control a potential issue. Don't love that changeup as a potential third pitch for him. But not a lot of 18-year-olds that are throwing in the mid to high 90s already. So certainly has a lot of tools. And last but not least, Jamie Arnold, the guy who was projected to go first in the mock draft that was unfortunately incorrect. I think his stuff and his control could both be above average. Also has a 4-pitch arsenal. Stamina and hold runners are solid. Not the greatest personality in the world, low leadership and work ethic. So that's negative. He is with currently 40 stuff, 40 movement, and 40 control, pretty far along. The left-hander from FSU, not too far off being able to help in the major leagues. The big question is whether we want someone who has a little more of a high ceiling than perhaps Arnold does, given that we're picking second overall. And even if they're not as popular with our scout, we will check in on a few other players projected to go in the top 10. Brady Abell, third baseman out of Rancho Cucamonga, California. Looks like he's got a little pop in the bat with a nice arm on him. Shortstop Kason Cunningham, 19-year-old out of San Antonio, Texas. Like the work ethic, decent speed, solid fielder. The bat looks like it could be usable, but certainly not great. Xavier Nayans, another third baseman, some negative personality traits, does have some pop in the bat. Shortstop Quentin Young, projected to go 7th overall. Another guy with some pop in the bat, a decent fielder. Angel Cervantes, starting pitching prospect, not all that impressive to me. 4-pitch arsenal, but he's got a lot of work to do. Barely touches 90 on the radar gun. Don't think his stuff is ever really going to be average for a major leaguer, so a lot of work ahead of him. Another shortstop, JoJo Parker. Average looking hitting profile, decent defensively, okay on the base paths. And the final guy projected to go in the top 10 is the starting pitcher, River Hamilton. Looks like best case scenario, he's a 4th starter perhaps, and with the low work ethic, no guarantees that he's going to hit the best case scenario. A few other players recommended by our scout. We already talked about Laviolette. We already talked about Liam Doyle. The other two we haven't talked about. We did talk about Sean Gamble. I think Seth Hernandez. Yeah, we talked about Seth Hernandez too. I'm losing it. I'm just babbling at this point. So, going to have some interesting decisions to make. Obviously wish that Ethan Holiday had fallen to us, but felt that was always a little bit of a dream more than something that would happen in reality. Couple other guys to check in that we have talked about in the past. Actually, one that we haven't talked about in the past, but he's got a fantastic personality. That's Cameron Appenzeller, left-handed starting pitching prospect. Concern with him is he may give up a lot of home runs. And we'll go back to take a look at some of the batters. And our old buddy, Caden Bodine, the catcher that we did meet with extensively during the time that we had back in June. Pretty solid defensive catcher. The bat is just okay. Definitely didn't blow us away at the combine last month. I got to be honest, I think there's a pretty significant drop-off behind Holiday, but that's what happens when it's a one-player draft and you get the second pick rather than the first pick, and the team ahead of you doesn't make a mistake. And clearly I'm being hyperbolic to say it's a one-player draft. There's definitely some players who can help us. As I noted, probably if we go with an infielder, still leading towards Sean Gamble. Like the personality, like the versatility and the defensive quality, like his above-average skills on the base paths, and think he could be a pretty good contact hitter, kind of average at everything else. Left-handed hitting middle infielder, could be a useful player. Probably leaning that way if we go with a batter. If we go with a pitcher, it's a little more difficult to me. Seth Hernandez, I certainly like the ceiling on him. But a guy with low work ethic definitely worries me a little bit about that guy actually reaching said ceiling. Evan Crest as a college player is pretty well developed, but just a lot of negative personality traits there as well. Liam Doyle, not quite as developed in terms of his control, but does have that potential four-pitch arsenal, which is nice. Looking for a lot of money, but we've got money to spend, and the left-hander is a guy who's not too far off from being able to help us in the major leagues. Miguel Sime Jr., that lack of control for an 18-year-old scares me a bit. And then Jamie Arnold, just don't like some of those negative personality traits, but he is probably the closest to being ready. I think if we were to go with a pitcher, it's probably either Arnold or Liam Doyle among the college pitchers. I could certainly be convinced to go after the high schooler Seth Hernandez, but as I said, that low work ethic really has me concerned about his ability to truly reach his ceiling. So honestly, not sure which direction we're going to go. As I said, it would have been an easy decision if Holiday had fallen to us, but that's why he didn't end up falling to us. We will make that decision next time around, but if the Worldwide Scouting Department has any thoughts on what we should do, would love to hear them. I will say normally when I request help from the Worldwide Scouting Department, I like to give at least 24 hours. But in this case, with my excitement around playing the new game and continuing to move forward and getting through this very miserable 2025 season to our first off season, so I can start trying to rebuild these Los Angeles Angels, I'm not going to wait all that long until I start the next episode. So if you opine within about 10 hours or so of when this video is posted on Saturday evening in the eastern United States, I will be able to include your thoughts and input in my decision making. If you opine later than that, obviously interested in hearing what you think and what your rationale is, but it won't ultimately end up likely influencing my decision. So if the Worldwide Scouting Department has thoughts with what we should do with this second pick, would love to hear them. Otherwise, would love to know if you're seeing any similar things with scouting accuracy in this game. Definitely have put the Angels in a position at this point where we've invested 2 times baseline in scouting. So we should be able to get some pretty decent scouting reports when all is said and done. So it does seem that perhaps scouting may be a little more challenging to complete, which for high school and college players, I don't hate it if they've kind of made it a little more difficult. I feel like even in 2025, when you've got video of everybody out there and it's easy to travel, easy to watch games of college players and even high school players in many cases, that there still should be some information disparities and some guys that you just don't know as much about. So if it's being done intentionally, I don't hate it. But it also could just be something that I'm doing with the new version of the game that I'm messing up. So a lot to think about here. And next time around, we'll make a decision on what to do with the second pick in the draft and see if we can bring somebody on board who can be helping us in a few seasons. Until our next episode, thanks so much for watching and hope you have a great day.